My mother was a teacher, and we have a lot of teachers and former teachers here. Y'all got some stories, don't you? Seen some things through the years, so I get to hear a lot of these stories. One that really was vivid for me is the story of a kindergarten teacher. And it was one of those Ohio days, where it had snowed forever, and so recess outside was like a mud pit. So the kids had to bring snow boots if they wanted to play outside. So the kindergarten teacher, before recess, was getting all of the kids ready, putting all their snow boots on. And there was one little boy who was having a hard time getting his boots on. So the teacher bent down to help him. She couldn't get him on. She struggled. She pulled and she tugged. If you have kids, you have fought this battle with shoes before, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. She pulled and she tugged. She was sweating. They were so hard to get on. And she finally got them on. And she said, okay, let's go out to recess. The little boy said, but teacher, the boots are on the wrong feet. Looked down, sure enough they were. She had the left on the right on the left, so she pulled and she tugged, used all of her might to get them off. Started the battle again. They didn't go on any easier on the right feet. So she pulled and she tugged. She got them on after a long battle. The little boy says, teacher, these aren't my boots. She now remembered she didn't like children very much. As she pulled and tugged to get the boots off. And as soon as she pulled that last boot off, the little boy said, they're my brother's. My mom made me wear them today. She wondered if they had a substitute that was there available for the rest of the day. As she pushed as hard as she could to get the boots back on. She fought the war, she fought the battle again, and she got them on, and she waited. He didn't say anything. She said, okay, let's go out to recess. Wear your mittens. He said, I stuffed them in my boots. We all have experiences in life that cause us to remember why people are difficult, right? People sometimes, let's just be honest, we don't like them very much, right? Life would be a lot easier without other people. And yet we exist, right? We have to live with other people. We have these experiences that cause us to question why we have to like other people. People are difficult. People are hard. When we went through COVID and we got locked down, right? And we were kind of pushed into our own homes, more so than we ever had been before. And we didn't have people around us all the time. I took time in that time period to really ask God to use this in my heart, to tell me, what can I learn from all this? Because I have to be honest, part of me was actually looking forward to it a little bit. A break from people, right? They can wear you out. This was almost like an extended vacation. Didn't have to deal with people as much. But what God really laid on my heart and taught me in that time was this. We are created to live in relationship with people. God made you and I so that we cannot live this life the way that He created us to live it without each other. And so what we found was this wasn't a break from people and made life harder It was a struggle even for the greatest of introverts. We needed others. And I believe God used that time to reveal that to us, how deeply we needed one another to grow in Him, how we're designed that as we go through this process of being disciples, of growing in becoming disciples of Jesus Christ, we needed one another. We might readily agree on that truth because we've experienced that in some ways in our lives. We have people that have helped us along the way. We have people we look up to that have spoken to us, who have helped us, who have helped us move past things that we struggle with. And yet, it doesn't change the fact that people are hard and difficult. And so, if we're created to be in relationship with one another, and people are difficult, how do we do that? Fortunately for us, the scriptures give us all this great wisdom and advice on how we live with one another, on what that's supposed to look like in our lives as disciples of Jesus Christ. That is what we are exploring in this One Another series. In the New Testament, there's a Greek word, aleilon. It is used 100 times. It is the word that is typically translated one another. 59 of those times, it is a command. 59 of the times, it is God saying, here is what you need to do with one another. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at what it is that God asks us to do with one another. How we overcome the difficulties and struggles in being in relationships with one another and live it the way that God created us and designed us to live it. But before we look at that, I think the important question that we have to ask ourselves is, who are we talking about? Who is our one another? If God calls us, for instance, to love one another, who am I supposed to love? So before we look at those direct commands, I want to give you 4 answers to that question. Who the one another's are in your life that God is calling you to live in a relationship with in each of the ways that we see the scriptures call us to be in relationship with them throughout this study. So answer number 1 is the easiest one for us to think about, and that is that our one another's are our brothers and sisters in Christ. It's the people we go to church with. Now, I'm not going to give you a specific verse for this, and here's why. Because almost every one another verse is written to a church. It's written to people that mostly Paul was saying, you guys aren't living together well, and here's what you need to do with one another to change that. Almost every single one of these verses in its immediate context is about Christians living with one another and how we do that better. So I don't put this number 1 because I think it's the most important. I think I put this number 1 because it is the most prominent answer to that question. If we're literally going to look at the New Testament and say, who is he talking about here? Almost always, it's talking about other Christians directly. Now, I think what we'll find is it can be applied to many other people in our lives, but when we look in the context of the verse, it is applied to us directly. What that means is this: the church is not something that we go to. The church is not something that we join or become a part of. The church is the relationship that we have with each other. We live for and exist for, as a church, for one another. This is why, as we start these small groups that we're encouraging you to be a part of, one of our main mission principles and our goals is for us to build loving relationships with one another, to deepen and widen the relationships that exist within the church. Because that's who God has called us to be. That's how God has described what the church is. And so the very point of these is for us to establish deeper relationships with one another, so that we have more opportunities to show the love of Christ to one another. So as we think about all these verses, they are directly, we should think about, how do I do these things with the people that I go to church with? Not just gather together on a Sunday morning with, but who are a part of the body of believers, who are brothers and sisters in Christ. How do I lay down my life and give up who I am for them? Number 2, one another is our family. The church often talks about what it means for us to be parents or spouses or children. But I want to read you a verse, because sometimes I don't think we understand and grasp how deep the call is in Scripture for us to take care of our families. This is from 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, the Apostle Paul writing to a young man he's mentoring, Timothy. But those who won't care for their relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the true faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. Those are strong words. And we might ask ourselves, why is that? How can that be? How can it be if Paul says, if I don't care for my relatives, how am I worse than somebody who doesn't have faith? And the answer is this: if you can't be Jesus to the people that God puts in your life, how are you going to be Jesus to anybody else? Because that's really what it means to live for one another. Is we become the hands and feet of Jesus in each other's lives. And if we can't do that for the people who are immediately in our vicinity, why would we do that for anyone else? Now I want you to notice a couple things here. Number 1, he says, you won't take care of your relatives. Right? It's an important word. Because what that means is you have the ability to. You have the opportunity to, and you refuse to do it. It is a refusal. I can do this, but I won't do it. What he doesn't say is if you can't take care of your relatives. Because some of you, I know you hear those words and you already feel guilty about what you can and can't do for people in your family. And some of you, I know, and we've seen, you work so much of your lives to take care of your children and your spouses and the people you loved, and you feel guilty that you can't do more. That's not what this verse is saying. This verse isn't saying you need to kill yourself to make sure that they have everything they need. No, that's not it. It's you saying, I know they need help and I won't do it. I refuse to do it. For whatever reason. If you can't, family lives far away. You don't have the financial resources. Or you might say, I can't put mom or dad in a home because they need to live in my house. That's what this means. That's not what this is saying. Because you might not be able to offer them the care they need. This is saying you could and you won't. And when you do that, you are not taking care of one another the way you're called to. So as we journey through this and we talk about what it means to live for one another, we should be asking ourselves, how can I do this with my immediate family, with the people who live in my house, with the people that I'm related to? And let's be honest, sometimes they're the hardest people to do this with. Our one another is our family. Third, one another is everybody. You might say, why didn't you start with that one? We just cover everything, right? But I build to this because there are people who would tell you this. There were people who say these scriptures in their context are only for other Christians. And that's the only people that God is telling you that you need to do this with. And so I had Mike read the parable of the Good Samaritan, and I had him read that on purpose for this reason. Because Jesus was asked the same question, wasn't he? They come and they try to trip him up and they say, Jesus, tell us, what's the most important commands in the law? And he ends up saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. And immediately they ask the question, what? Who's my neighbor? Who do I got to love? Now, the person asking that question already knew what they thought the answer was. They wanted Jesus to confirm it for them. They wanted Jesus to say, your neighbor's people who look like you. Your neighbor's people who believe like you. Your neighbor's people who vote like you. Your neighbor's people that are like you. Go love them. Instead, Jesus tells a parable. He tells a parable. It's very familiar to us, the Good Samaritan. Or a man is robbed. He's going from Jericho to Jerusalem. He gets robbed on this road along the way. He's left for dead. Priest walks by. Priest knows all the laws. He knows all the reasons why he shouldn't help that man, so he keeps going. Levite comes by. He knows all the same laws. He knows all the reasons why he shouldn't help that man, and keeps on going. And then a Samaritan comes by. Samaritan wasn't a kind word to describe somebody in Jesus' day. A Samaritan didn't follow the law. A Samaritan wasn't purely Jewish. A Samaritan didn't look like them and talk like them. A Samaritan didn't go to the temple and make sacrifices and worship there. They didn't do any of the right things. But the Samaritan stopped and helped the man. And so Jesus flips it. He doesn't answer the question. He asks his own. So you tell me who was a neighbor to the man who was robbed. And the expert in the law gives the only answer he can. The one who showed mercy on him. Here's what's important about Jesus' story today. The importance is this. Jesus tells us nothing about the man who got robbed. He doesn't tell us that he was Jewish or wasn't Jewish. Doesn't tell us he's Samaritan or not. He doesn't tell us anything about him. He puts zero labels on him. That's so often in this world how we decide who we're going to love and not love. Who we're going to let be our one another. We look at the labels that people put on others. We look at labels that people put on us. And we say, those are the kind of people that are my one another's. Those are my people. These are my people. And I want you all to hear today that our people are anyone who comes into this place wanting to know Jesus. We don't care what you look like. We don't care what language you speak. We don't care what your past looks like. We don't even care what your future looks like. Because we know who Jesus is in us. And we want you to know that too. Everybody is your one another. Yes, we have to think, how do I do this with the people that I go to church with? How do I do this with my family? Those are going to be the most common opportunities that you have. But everything we talk about, from loving one another, to being kind and compassionate, to whatever the one another is, every single person you come in contact with, whether they look like you, talk like you, whether you like them or not, you have to ask yourself, how do I do this for them? How do I live this for them? That leads us to our last one. Your one another is people you don't like very much. Because if it includes everybody, that means everybody, right? Because Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, almost everything that Jesus quotes in the Sermon on the Mount is him saying, you said here was the line, and I'm telling you it's actually up here, right? So when Jesus says here on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, you heard the law say love your neighbor. Remember the law he quoted. Hate your enemy. I say love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And that way you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good. He sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different than anyone else? Even pagans do that. When I read that word enemy, I don't know about you, but I don't really talk about my enemies I'm not like a superhero that has an arch nemesis or something. That's not a word that's really in my vernacular. But so when I read it, I think people I don't like very much. Or maybe people who've hurt me. People who've done things to me. So I read that verse that way. Maybe you don't. Maybe you read that word enemy. Maybe you feel like you're at war with somebody. Maybe there's somebody who's hurt you. Maybe somebody from your past who's done something to you. Maybe somebody in your present who's still doing it to you. Maybe it's people who've said things about you or said things to you. Maybe there's just somebody that they just rub you the wrong way. The way they talk. Their politics. Something in their life. Something that you just don't like. Whether it's something that they've done or whether it's something that they are. They're your one another. And Jesus says that you are to love them. And all these things that he calls us to do for the people that we do love, we actually have to do it for the people that we don't want to love either. So as we explore in this what it means to live for one another, you should continually be asking yourself, how are you going to be giving yourself up for the last person that you would ever want to give yourself up for? How are you going to give yourself up for that person who does not deserve whatever you would give them? How are you going to give yourself up for that person who's hurt you and doesn't deserve the kindness and goodness you'll give them? How are you going to give yourself up for the last person you'd consider giving yourself up for? Because Jesus says, if you won't give yourself up for them, I have made no difference in your life. You're no different than anybody else. And I'm here to tell you, if you're no different than anybody else after you met Jesus, you haven't met Jesus yet. Because he doesn't leave you the same. He changes you. He changes how you live. He changes who you are. The greatest way that he needs to change us is this. If you've raised kids in this modern era, you've watched a lot of animated movies. And when Wesley was little, not so much anymore, right? No, you've grown out of it? Yeah. Every day we watched the same movies over and over and over and over again. We'd go through these phases, you know. If Disney had a movie on, we'd DVR it. He'd wake up in the morning, 6 a.m., it's whatever Disney movie we just did. 6 p.m., it's the same movie. It's still going. So I know these movies well. And we had the Finding Nemo phase, right? Finding Nemo got DVR'd and we started watching it. And there are this cast of characters in Finding Nemo. The seagulls. If you've seen Finding Nemo, you remember the seagulls, right? That's right. You hear it. Get to this point at the end, if you don't remember it or haven't seen it, where Nemo's dad, Marlin, and his friend Dory, right? They get left on a pier, and they were getting swallowed by a pelican. They got saved. Now another pelican who knows Nemo is coming to say, "Hey, I know who you are. I'm going to take you to your son. Jump in my mouth." To which they say, "We'd rather die here on the pier," right? And then, as they're talking, all the seagulls fly in. And he says, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." And then you just hear one of them, "Mine." And then you hear all of them, "Mine, mine, mine, mine." Every time they saw food in the movie, that's it. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. And there's this whole series of them chasing. And the whole time they're chasing, trying to get Nemo, or trying to get Marlin and Dory out of the pelican's mouth, they're chanting the whole time, mine, 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 mine. And I'm telling you today, and you're not going to like to hear this, I hear the same chorus all the time in the church in America. That everything we see and everything we hear, as soon as we see what we need, it's mine. And I come here for what's mine. I come here to get here for me. I need something, it's mine. I need prayer today, it's mine. I need something from Jesus today, it's mine. I need love today, I need peace, I need purpose. And it's all about me. And I don't know if you're paying attention, but Jesus is saying, if you know me, it's not about you. When Jesus, in Mark chapter 1, he goes to his disciples. He calls Peter and Andrew and James and John, and they're fishing. And he calls them to follow him. What does he say to them? Follow me, and you'll find everything you've ever wanted. Follow me, and I'll show you how to find purpose in your life. Follow me, and I'll show you how to find love and joy and peace and hope and all the things you've been longing for. He doesn't say any of that, does he? All those things are true about following Jesus, but what he says to them is what? Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And what Jesus is saying is, when you follow me, the only way you're going to find out how to find what I have for you, the only way you're going to have your life changed is if you commit your life to changing the lives of others. It's only in living for others that you find what you need for yourself. Follow me. Which meant give up, lay down your whole life for everybody else. And you'll find everything that you need in me. Until you know who you're living for, you'll never find out what you're living for. Until you realize every day who it is, who your one another's are, you won't truly come to understand and know the one who has everything that you need. And in living for each other, you'll find in him the fulfillment, the purpose, the joy, the love, the grace, the peace, everything that you've been searching for everywhere else. And call the worship team up, and we're going to sing the song we sang last week. And there's a line in the verse here. And the line says, "Let my song join the one that never ends." And what I want you to hear today is that our lives are a song, and we have a choice. You can be a solo act. You can sing whatever song you want. God has given you that freedom. And your song can be all about you. You can sing that course of mine for as long as you want. Over and over and over again. Or you can join the chorus, the symphony, who lives to sing in harmony with Jesus. We miss some notes time and again. We might be off key here and there. We might be off beat, but we're singing the same song. We're a part of the same symphony, singing of the love of Jesus Christ. Not that's mine, but that's yours. That's everyone's. Because he lives, because he gave me life, I can live for you. And you can live for each other. So let's stand together and let's celebrate that we have a life to live for someone else because of the one who lived for us.